My name is Samuel Gwenzi, and I'm a human rights defender with 12 years in the trenches for the democratic struggle in Zimbabwe, in Africa, and in the globe. I'm a Zimbabwean citizen. I think if you need to know me, I'm a humble man from Chipinge who is concerned about his country, his community, his family, and that drives me to make a contribution for the democratization of my country, Zimbabwe. You'll be on the front line of defending, protecting, and promoting human rights in the country, which actually are significant as they are anchored on our Ubuntu philosophy, that I am whom you are, and you are who I am. So those are the kind of philosophy that drives my human rights defender activities and contribution to Zimbabwe, where the rights of Zimbabwean citizens has to be sacrosanct and has to be respected so that we have a democratic country.
Okay, let's get into why we really called you for this interview. On July the 31st, news broke that you, Namatai Kwekweza, Vusumuzi Moyo, and Robson Chere were disembarked in an aeroplane which was about to take off. I believe it was headed for Victoria Falls. You were kept incommunicado, I believe, at the airport for 8 hours. You were dumped at the Harare Central Police Station, arrested and charged with an offense, a criminal offense. What is your take about the event that took place on July the 31st?
It was a horror kind of event that I wouldn't want any human being to go through. What happened is that we were taken by unknown men when the flight was about to take off, and we were taken into the domestic terminal in a space which looks like a chamber, a torture chamber of some sort, where the four of us had to go through various interrogation through torture by these unknown state agencies per se. So they used their feet, they used their bare hands, they used metal bars to beat us during that particular process, whilst they're interrogating us on whether we are planning for a demonstration, who are planning for demonstration, what kind of meeting are you going to have in Victoria Falls. And I think the activities and actions on the day were driven by paranoia by the state, which I think is because of legitimate crisis emanating from the 2023 election, that these comrades of ours who are driving the Harare administration, they don't believe that they have got the backing of the support of the people. And I think that makes them enter into this kind of paranoia where they are trying to suffocate the voice of citizens, especially those that are deemed aligned to the opposition. So in that case, they wanted to have a SADC summit, and I think the SADC summit was meant to legitimize their leadership, since the SADC election report were conspicuous on the 2023 election. So I think we became victims because of the paranoia that the state is in currently.
Is this new at all in a democratic country?
It's so surprising. We have been having bouts of repression during the Mugabe era, but the most worrying part is how can a sitting government be so obsessed with a rotational seat, which probably Zimbabwe has been part and parcel of for more than 5 times, if I can remember, where Robert Mugabe was the SADC chairperson. And I'm not quite so sure why we had to go through the acts of July and August, where a number of activists were imprisoned. And I understand different reports from various human rights organizations says they were around 167. So it's actually an unprecedented kind of activity where there is serious repression and closure of the democratic space. When I was later arrested, when we were later dumped at the Harare Central Prison, they said we were charged on disorderly conduct, which I believe is a level 2 criminal offense, which if convicted, you get a fine of around $25. So surprisingly, that charge made us to stay for nearly 35 days in prison, and actually at the maximum prison in the country, Chikurubi
maximum prison.
Chikurubi maximum prison.
What was the disorderly conduct for?
We did not commit any crime, yes. And I think the charge was designed to clean the mercy of our torture that happened at the airport. So it was just trying to window dress the unlawful arrest so that it becomes legitimized through the disorderly conduct. The disorderly conduct, they say that we were demonstrating at the Harare Magistrate Court on a case of timber and others so that they may be released. And we were demonstrating against the state in terms of their unlawful arrest.
I understand your position that you are not at that demonstration, but
yes.
My understanding of the supreme law of Zimbabwe is that demonstrations are indeed constitutional. In fact, you are part of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights of 1966. It protects individuals who want to demonstrate. So what does this tell us about the rights to freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of assembly? Are they at risk at all?
I think basically we have digressed as a country. It's now rule by law. There is no longer rule of law in the country, in my understanding, because according to Section 59 of the Zimbabwean Constitution of 2013, it gives Zimbabweans the right to petition and demonstrate. And the charge that we are being alleged to have committed is actually enshrined in the supreme law of the land. But far more, I think we have digressed so much as a country. Firstly, is because of the robbing that happened during the 2023 election, where we consider the election were not free and fair and they were rigged in favor of the ruling elite. And I think the reports from the Commonwealth, the reports from SADC clearly highlight that. And not just that, we can also see how the whole political infrastructure in parliament, which is supposed to formulate the legislation, were hijacked by a guy called Songezo, who managed to recall nearly 3/4 or a quarter of opposition legislators and councillors in that process, which renders the legislative process in the country in shrink. So not just that, civic society leaders have been in and out of courts, they have been in prison, they've been in police custody for different crimes, which happens to be on issues of expression and assembly. And that speaks to a country that is in chaos by just individuals that wants to control or to remain in power against all odds. And I think the basic aspects of a society is that there has to be a social contract between those governed and those that govern. And I think in our case in the country, it doesn't exist. And you cannot just see the shrinking of the democratic space in isolation. Even the economy, the kind of corruption that exists in the country, the kind of a monarchy that is being created by some element that says 2030, Anenga Chipo. All this speaks to the degeneration of our democracy, and especially the respect of the rule of law.
Now, I understand, according to Amnesty International, 160 people have been arrested. Amongst these individuals are politicians, they are activists, they are human rights defenders, what we call HRDs in our own circumference. Now, you spent about 35 days in prison. Please explain, what is life like behind bars?
Prison life is worst kind of life that any human being will need to succumb to. It's where your rights are curtailed. You cannot have an interface with your family. You cannot have a proper interface with your social life in terms of freedom. And the worst part of my experience in prison life is that I understand I'm a law-abiding citizen of this country. And I was in prison with criminals of different nature, rapists, armed robbers, murderers, and all sorts of criminals, hardcore criminal that you can talk about. And that is the kind of space that I was into. But far more, I'm a human being. I believe it's part and parcel of our fight for a democratic Zimbabwe. But to be fair, the situation in prison is really not worth it, because you are locked by 3 p.m. You'll be in your cells to make sure that you sleep. You have your dinner at around 2:30. You have your lunch at around 12. And the food that you eat is not worthy for human consumption. And secondly, the place that you'll be staying, that you'll be sleeping on the floor, and the prison facility don't offer even blankets for you, and they offer only one pair of wear, of prison wear that you wear during that process. You will have more of lices as part and parcel of your body. So yeah, those are some of the things that you go through. The conditions are not worth it. It's actually a health hazard environment. And but fair enough, God and our fighting spirit makes it easier for us to survive such an ordeal.
Before I go on to the next question,
yeah.
Do you think there are mechanisms or organizations which are really doing enough to improve the living conditions of people in prison?
I'm not quite so sure, but I think there is support structures from churches. Probably they are given access by the state to help inmates whilst they are in prison. And those are the very people that makes it easier. And I think I urge all church members, I've seen Zayoja also being part and parcel of the church community in prisons. They give different support structures, material stuff to inmates that subscribe to their religious philosophy. You also see SDA also getting chances. But I think I urge various church members to also come on board and assist in one way or the other, including the spiritual support that also comes with these religious elements. But I've not seen any other institution outside the church fraternity who plays that particular role. And I think we need to put more effort in terms of seeing reforms in the National Prosecuting Authority, which also happens to work with prisons, and also the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, which speaks to the rights not just of free people, but equally of prisoners, so that they also look into the welfare and the general treatment of prisoners.
No, indeed. I think this is something which is crucial for the prisoner, whether they are guilty or not, because at the end of the day, they are humans, just like me and you.
Yeah.
Now, I know you have been in the democratic space for over a decade.
Yeah.
You have worked advancing academic freedoms for over a decade.
Mm-hmm.
In those years, you have gained, I believe, experience, and you have witnessed firsthand what the crisis is in Zimbabwe. What will be your advice or your strategic outlook as to how we can best solve the issues to do with a rule of law in Zimbabwe?
It's difficult because the whole fabric of the rule of law is destroyed. Mostly destroyed because of the leadership that we have. And I think the first thing that we need to do is to ensure that we build or we have servant leadership who respect the Constitution, who live by the Constitution through constitutionalism. We also need to ensure, so it starts with leadership, the ones whom we elect to go to parliament, to ensure that the caliber of leaders to take seriously the aspect of elections, so that because our legislators are critical in terms of monitoring the legislation and also ensuring their legislative role of enactment of legislations. So if you don't have a leadership that respects the Constitution, then you are likely to have the crisis that we find ourselves in. Then secondly, I think it all goes to the citizens themselves. We are faced with the leaders who don't respect the rule of law, who use the law to suffocate our democracy, our rights. So in this circumstance, there is need of a conscious citizens who are able to claim their rights as enshrined in the Constitution, because the Constitution has to be our Bible. So there is need of a civic society that is strong enough to challenge the status quo of our Constitution, the status quo of our judiciary, the status quo of our parliament, the status quo of our different state institutions. So we need a vibrant civic movement that is able to stand firm, that is able to fight, protect, and promote human rights and the rule of law in the country. Then I think the other issue is that we also need a strong opposition. And a strong opposition is the one that is able to monitor and challenge the various policy propositions, so that we are able to have a proper policy that is pro-people, a policy that is pro the Constitution, pro rule of law, from the excesses of the ruling elite or the main political party in the country, or the ruling political party in the country. So we actually need also a strong opposition. And as far as I see today, I find our political movements have been shaken by the authoritarian system, hence rendering much of the opposition a little bit weak at the moment. But I think it's an advantage because it gives the opposition or the democratic alternative an opportunity to build and launch a strong movement that is able to fight the status quo. But also the civic society has to rethink itself. Rather than operating in silos, they have to build a more collective movement based on common agenda. And I think even the core relationship between democratic alternatives and the civic society has to be on the Zimbabwean agenda. And I think the Zimbabwean agenda is very clear. There is rampant corruption You understand the Henry Ushuaia's gold scandals. You understand the gold mafia, which highlighted how our wealth, how our minerals are being siphoned by those that are in power today. And the executive, equally the president, has been pointed out in such videos. So all these things speaks clearly to what can unite the country. And not just that, corruption has also been rampant in many forms, but you have also seen the broken health system. Many of the infrastructure in our hospitals cannot sustain the population, and there are no medication, and there is no even motivation of health practitioners. There is also there's an employment flight of medical practitioners. And not just that, even our education system right now, you have heard of how corrupt the system is, where people are being awarded degrees that they have not worked on. So the whole fabric of the country is down, and I believe the country is in ICU. But this gives us a big opportunity of having a rallying point among every Zimbabwean, despite one's political ideology, whether you are from this party or that party, which gives us a more collective approach to say enough is enough. It's not just that. We also need the voice of the diaspora. They are living as second-class citizens in the different countries that they are in. You find the xenophobia, which equally attacks more of Zimbabweans as Makwerekwere in our neighboring countries. And that is happening even in Mozambique, where at one time we were the key economic players to support them. So I think there is much more that can unite us as Zimbabweans to launch a far more offensive approach towards dictatorship in the country.
That was quite a complex response. Having gone through torture, having been arrested, assaulted, I understand you're even surveilled as you speak.
Yeah.
What's next for you?
Yeah, we'll remain in the trenches. We have got no option but to fight, and I think this gives us a more zeal to fight for our own country, and it shows that we are in the right track. We have got the future in our hands, and I think destiny is going to smile for us when we march into a new democratic Zimbabwe, and I believe it's going to happen in our lifetime. And we cannot outsource the fight that we have for our own Zimbabwe, but ourselves to be our own liberators. And I think the inspiration comes equally from what the liberation fighters did to their country. They never went backward, despite the challenges that they have to face. And as for me, I will collectively, with all concerned citizens, to confront the challenges that we face today. And I'm in tears when I see our currents as eroded in the circumstance that I find after being in prison. And many of them are losing the value, the buying power, because of our ZIG currents. And that speaks to a leadership that is not forward-looking, that thinks about its own people. Instead, it thinks about arresting fellow Zimbabweans whose only crime is to cry for a democratic, developed Zimbabwe. And I think that is the driving power that we have. And I think the gods are smiling on us to say we are in the right track for a new great Zimbabwe.
Samuel, indeed, you are in the right track. Thank you for your courage and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for the interview. Shalom.